Welcome everyone to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies and the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. SIMS is a group that studies manuscripts. We also have a couple of great collections, and once a week at Thursday at noon Eastern Time, I hop on Zoom with one of our books, sometimes more. Actually, I have a second book that I might show you very briefly today, just to do a really informal sort of show and tell. Oftentimes, these are books that I don't actually know a whole lot about. This is one. I picked this one because it's not coming apart. The spine is off, and you can see the binding really well. So I'm very interested in the physicality of books, so I was like, I'll show you the physicality. And then this morning, I started doing a little more research into this, and it turns out it has a really interesting provenance, and also the text is pretty interesting too in ways I wasn't expecting. So I only have half an hour. Hopefully I'll be able to sort of talk a little bit about everything I wanted to. If you haven't been here before, you're very welcome. If you have questions as we go along, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I will catch them as I can. Also, my colleague, Amy Hutchins, is here. Amy is our manuscripts cataloger, and she is incredibly knowledgeable and will also answer questions if I miss them. So, without any further ado, let us get started. So this is, as I said, LJS 381. LJS means it's in the Schoenberg collection. This was collected by Lawrence Schoenberg, and we have received these as a gift in the past few years. So LJS 381, it is a 15th century Italian manuscript. So written maybe in Padua, but definitely in Italy between 1455 and 1465, we think. So just after the middle of the 15th century. It has, one of the reasons that I was really interested in it is that it is in a contemporary binding. And what a contemporary binding means is that if you look at the binding separate from the text block and you date it, and you say this is what a binding looks like that was made in whatever time, and then you look at the text block and you say, well, this text was made in whatever time, those are going to be the same times. It is distinct from an original binding. This is also a term that you'll see used in descriptions. The original binding makes a claim that this is the binding that the book has always been in, and it's never been in another binding. Original bindings are unusual to find. Books are rebound. Almost every manuscript in our collection has been rebound at some time. So a contemporary binding, it's possible that this is the original binding, but we're not prepared to make that claim. But it was made at the same time. So it was either put in this binding originally or pretty soon after the text block was made. So that's one thing that's pretty neat about it. So this is also a 15th century binding. It is leather over boards, so wooden boards, really nice. It's kind of coming apart, which is a shame on one hand, but on the other hand, it means you can really see how the book is put together. And a lot of you probably don't know, but this is a research interest for me. So I love it when I get a book that's coming apart, that I can see it. So let's take a look at the covers first. So this is leather, and it's pretty. You can imagine that this was at one time a really, really nice book. It had very nice leather with, decoration that's pretty intense. It's pretty nice. It had, I think these are fabric straps. So if you look here, there's metal. Through here, there would have been red fabric, both the top and the bottom, and on the side. And if we flip it over and look at the back, you can see more of that great leather. You'll see there's metal here and here and here. That metal is still there. and there would have been clasps to hold the book shut, which is sort of a good thing. So then we'll look at the spine, closer to the spine. So this is particularly interesting for me and hopefully for you. So the way that the book is made is there are sheets of parchment that are folded and made into these little booklets that we call quires or gatherings. And you can see them here, these little lines. Each one of these is a separate little group of folded parchments. In this case, it's parchment leaves. And then they're sewn together. And so we talk about, I'll say this, and that it's sewn together. Well, what does that mean? In this case, we have strips of, it looks like leather, strips of leather that have been sliced through the middle here. You can see there's this sort of line through the middle. And then the quires are sewn onto these leather strips here. So you can sort of imagine there's going to be holes in the parchment coming up through the middle of the quire and then around here and around here. And it's sewn really nicely. So I say it's not coming apart. This is very solid. It's just that the leather part has come off. And so that's what that means. And then these leather strips are pulled into bevels that are cut into the wood, and they've been nailed in there, nailed together, and that's what holds the book together. And then it's covered with leather, and then it looks nice. So you don't usually get to see this. So this is pretty neat, and you can see how the wood has been cut. There are the bevels here. It's also been sort of cut along the edge, so it's not a straight edge. It's sort of in a little bit. There's also bevels here on the corners, and there would have been end bands sewn here, and on the top there, the leather end band is still, you can still see that it's not attached to the binding, and that would have been attached here. So the whole book would have been really solidly held together, and it's still pretty solid. Now let's take a look inside. Another thing that is pretty interesting is that we have these, we have a paste down and then a fly leaf that's made out of an earlier manuscript leaf. This is something that you see quite a bit. Parchment was expensive, and so you didn't want to waste it. So if you have a manuscript that isn't otherwise being used, you'll often see them being taken and used in binding. Let me just take a quick look and see if this is identified. Paste downs and conjugal fly leaves from a 14th century manuscript, possibly a grammatical text. So this is some kind of grammatical text that just wasn't being used, or maybe the book itself had been broken somehow, so it was used. There's also another one on the back. This one is a little not in as good condition, really. The text has come off, but that's the same. That's from the same manuscript, we think, as that. All right. So I mentioned the provenance being pretty interesting. So it was owned by a family, the Maffei family, and their coat of arms appears here. Here, it's been a little bit. Somebody looks like rubbed it or tried to erase it. Maybe there's been some kind of damage that's been done there, but you can see that coat of arms there. And this family was a prominent figure in humanist circles in the early 16th century Rome. I'm reading from an earlier description here. Mario Maffei, who owned this manuscript, was a prominent figure in humanist circles in early 16th century Rome. He served as an official of the papal chancery, as a canon, and as a bishop. So we know that this book was owned by this family. It was part of an extensive library, so it would have been one of many, many books that this family owned. And the dispersal of the library probably began in the late 16th or early 17th centuries. So after that, it was owned by some different people who are noted in the provenance field in the record, and their names appeared. I'll point out their names as they come through. All right, so what is the text? The text is two texts written by Sallust, who was a Roman historian who was writing in both of these texts were written in the 40s BCE, so the century before Common Era. And the first one is the Conspiracy of Catiline, and that I wasn't really, as I said, like I picked it out because the binding is neat, and it's also really beautifully written. I didn't even point out the initial. There's this beautiful initial at the front, and there's another one that we'll look at. Very Italian. I look at this and I'm like, oh, that's Italian. The Humanist script and the decoration just screams sort of 15th century Italian to me. So it's a great example. But the Catiline Conspiracy is the inspiration for an upcoming film by Francis Ford Coppola called Megalopolis, which is why in the links I put the link to the Megalopolis thing, because that, I don't know how, obviously I haven't seen the movie, I don't know how much it has to do with it, but it was neat to sort of be looking at this manuscript and then go, oh, I recognize this for these totally unrelated reasons. Right. So most of the decoration in this comes from the initials at the start of the little sections here. And if you've been here before, you know what I'm going to say here. It's red and blue alternating because that's what people do. So I'll page through. You can see a little bit more, probably red and blue. And also, we're going to see a lot of marginal notations. So there are a large number of marginal notations made by later, I don't think much later readers. Let me see. But it's interesting that somebody came through and made notes on variant readings, and then some of these were incorporated into the main text. And I'm going to see if we can find some, because supposedly what happened is they were incorporated and then things were erased. So if we look, let me zoom in a little bit here. I think this might be a place where this has happened. There's a word that was here. It's been erased and struck through. So here's a change. And there's something out in the margin, which has also been erased. So this was actually, no, you know what? Was it fully written out and then made into a abbreviation? Is that what happened there? That's kind of weird, because I'm seeing something similar. If you look up here, it looks like the word was fully written and then it was made into abbreviation, which is really strange, I think. Why would you take your time to do that? But I don't know. I'm seeing that some of these marginal notations are in red and other ones are in dark ink, black ink. So I guess that's different writers coming through, different people, but I don't think they're much later than that. And I realize I haven't been paying attention to the chat. Is there, text. Yeah, Ellen asks what the text block is. It's just all the text, all of the quires together without the binding. That's what the text block is. Peter says, the abbreviations saved the scribe's time and followed particular local customs, often are useful to establish origin and provenance of a manuscript. Yes, that is what abbreviations are for. What I'm pointing out, and I've never seen this before, is that it looks like the word was fully written and then it was erased and made into an abbreviation. And I think that's strange. I'm not sure I've ever seen that before. Usually when there are abbreviations, it's because the original scribe abbreviated the word. And so you'll have a lot of words in a very small space because a lot of words can be abbreviated. That's what the little, I don't know what, but that's what the little mark above it is. So if you see a couple of words with a mark over it, that's probably an abbreviation. And they are great for scribes and make it sometimes difficult for people trying to read them. All right, let's see. I will point out, because often when we're paging through books, I will point out where the edges have been cut and text is missing. It looks like that has not happened here. We have text written right up to the edge of the page, and this might be an argument one could make if one wanted to say this is the original binding, because often what happens when a book is rebound is the edges get trimmed to fit a new binding. I'm not sure why they have to do that, but it happens a lot. So it is interesting that these little things that might normally have been chopped off, or trimmed, I should say, have not been trimmed. All right. So the first text here is this text on I think it's called Catiline's War. It's a text on the Catiline conspiracy, which it's historical. It describes Catiline wanted to have a coup against, I think this was in the 60s, so it was Cicero and whoever else was the leader at that time. And he failed. And so there are a few historical texts that survive describing this, and this is one of them. And the second text, which we'll reach shortly, is Jugurthinum Bellum, which was another older war that was fought between Rome and another person, so another sort of war. But both of these texts, what these texts have in common is that they're about decline. It's sort of the decline of Rome is coming. And remember, he was writing in the 40s BCE. And there are probably interesting historical things to say about why this was of interest to people in Italy or in other parts of Europe at this time in the 15th century. Looking back on it, we can say, well, it's sort of the rise of the Renaissance and the end of what we think of as the Middle Ages, or the Dark Ages, which we don't like to say now. And so I imagine that that's one of the reasons why this was being written right now. So I'm coming in so we can take a closer look at this illuminated illuminated initial here, which is the start of the second text. And this is a lot nicer than the first one. This is very nice initial here. Yes, Amy, thank you, Amy. King Jugurtha of Numidia, a kingdom on the northern African coast. That's what it is. So it's a historical description of that war, and that's what this second text is here. We have more. Oh, you can't see that. More marginal notes, and very nice. So this is a very nice manuscript, Italian, and I was curious about the text, and as I said, why these were being copied at this time, and if this was sort of a one-off. So I did a little bit of research, the smallest amount of research, And in one of the older descriptions of the manuscript, it says that there was an edition of this text that was printed in 1490. So 45 years after this one, this manuscript was made. And it had some connection to the family that I already mentioned as owners, the Maffei family. So it's possible that this manuscript, especially because, remember, it has these notations in the margin that are sort of fixing things that then got put back into the text, that this was used as maybe one basis for that edition. And as far as I know, there's never been any work done on that, but it's interesting. It is also interesting that there was an edition that was made at this time. But we also, I searched our own catalog and discovered that we have a second manuscript of these same texts a little bit later that was made in Spain. So I will. This is really nice. There are also. This looks. I'm noticing these that I think are maybe chapter numbers. This looks a lot later to me. Amy's nodding her head. Yes. So there have been a lot of hands that have come through, and made various types of notes. I will come to the end because I wanted to note the previous owners. So we know the one because there's the coat of arms at the front, but they also liked to write their names in here. And so here at the bottom, we have, this is Clemente Carilli da Volterra, 17th century. So this is an owner, somebody who owned it in the 17th century. So this is one of the ways that we know that the book was no longer in this family's library, because we have this person writing who we know lived in a particular time. And then, if we go to the back flyleaf, there's sort of a lot happening at the end. Here, you can see there's a lot that's been written here. In fact, I think there's supposed to be the Mario Maffei. I think it's up here, but it's been erased, so you can't really see it. We have notes on rivers in Africa here. I don't know why, but somebody made a little note there. Okay. We have again another former owner. This is Giuseppe, I think that's Giuseppe Antonio Saccardini de Volterra, 1666. He's even dated it right there, 1666. He's written his name a second time. He wants you to know for sure that that's him. And then, I'm not sure what this is, but somebody else wrote something there on the back inscription. No, I'm not sure what exactly this is, but they were not shy about writing on their books. So that's LJS 381. Before we go, I just want to take a quick look at the other one because I think it's interesting to sort of compare even just how they look. So this is the same text. It's in a later binding. The binding looks a lot nicer. That's because it's older. It's newer. It's bigger. And as I say, this is more like 1499. Between 1470 and 1499, Spain, ? So this is not Italian. This is Spanish, we think. And you can see immediately that it looks very different. There is no illumination. The script is very different. It is a humanistic, it says humanistic script, but it looks different to me. It's not as easy, for me, it's not as easy to read as the other two. Thank you, Amy, for that. Yes, it's more cursive, right? It's more cursive. The other one is more print, and this is more cursive. It looks like there was probably supposed to be, or were supposed to be, illuminated initials. There's space, but nothing's been written in there. It's also been, there's some damage around the edges. There's wormholes, so it's been chewed on. There's some old mold here. We've had it treated. There's no mold, active mold, but it's still there. So this was not as kindly treated as the other one, but it's the same text written in a different, or copied in a different part of Europe, a little bit later. And so these are not the only, it would be really fun if we had the only two copies of 15th century. But no, what this means is that there were lots of other copies, right? This was a text that, for whatever reason, I can imagine, these texts about sort of the eventual downfall of Rome being copied in Europe in the 15th century in this transitional period. I think it's just really interesting to have these physical examples of this. And it might be fun to do a comparison. I'm seeing a lot of, even more than in the other manuscript, I'm seeing a lot of marginal notations and changes, maybe glosses being made. A comparison between these two manuscripts might be really interesting for that. Karen says the script in the first book is very similar to the Ramsey Psalter, which is the basis for Edward Johnston's foundational hand. The script is the model for Times New Roman. I think that's one of the reasons why humanist printing is easy for us to read, because it is the basis of the the script, the fonts that we have now. So I just wanted to show you this other example and encourage you to sort of think about this, this long history. So we have Sallust writing in the 40s BCE, and now it's being copied multiple times, in the 15th century, and people are thinking about this, and I just think it's really neat. And you can see the binding, and that's also really neat too. So it is 12:30. I will let you all go. Thank you so much for joining me in looking at these manuscripts, and I hope that you'll come back next week and in 2 weeks and later on, and have a good week, everybody.